The text message from my mother read, "Darling, please come over at 7. We need to celebrate Owen's graduation as a family." I stared at those words, my stomach twisting into a familiar knot of anxiety. At 32 years old, I'd learned that vague invitations from Camilla usually concealed an agenda that would leave me feeling drained, both emotionally and financially. My name is Eliza, and I've somehow become the family fixer, the one who covers my brother's medical school tuition when he fails another semester, who paid off my father's medical research investments that were actually gambling debts, and who still sends money for my mother's credit card bills. All this while struggling to maintain my position as nursing home administrator, a career my family considers beneath them, but one I'm genuinely proud of, even if I rarely say so aloud. I glanced at my watch, already 6:45 p.m. The evening shift handover at Sunnydale Care Home had run late, as 3 residents needed special attention. I debated texting Tessa, my best friend and colleague in physical therapy, but decided against it. She'd only tell me what I already knew, that I should stand up to my family. Instead, I quickly typed a response to my mother, "I'll be there by 7:15. Long day at work." Her reply was immediate, "Try to be prompt. This is important for your brother. Important for Owen." Of course. My younger brother who, despite being 27, was still being treated like the golden child of the family. The one who'd followed our father's footsteps into medicine, or was at least supposed to be. I knew the truth. He'd been repeating his 3rd year of medical school, a fact my parents conveniently omitted from family conversations. I checked my appearance in the rearview mirror as I pulled up to their suburban home at exactly 7:12 p.m., late enough to assert some independence, but not so late as to trigger one of my mother's dramatic episodes about disrespect. Through the bay windows, I could see figures moving about, caught snippets of conversation. Apparently, the family celebration was larger than I'd been told. My chest tightened with a familiar sense of foreboding. Taking a deep breath that did little to calm my nerves, I rang the doorbell. The door swung open almost immediately, and there stood Camilla, her hair perfectly styled as always, wearing an expensive blouse I recognized from a designer catalog I'd recycled at her house last month. Her smile, that particular one that never quite reached her eyes, told me everything I needed to know. "There's our nursing supervisor," she announced loudly as I stepped inside, emphasizing my title in a way that somehow made it sound less than it was. "Everyone, Eliza's finally arrived." Surprise! The chorus of voices hit me from all directions as family members emerged from the dining room and living area, aunts, uncles, cousins I barely recognized, all wearing eerily similar expressions of polite interest that didn't match the intensity in their eyes. "Oh. Wow." I managed, forcing my face into an expression of pleasant surprise I'd mastered over years of such ambushes. "I thought this was just a small family dinner for Owen." "Nothing's too small when celebrating academic excellence," Camilla said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of expensive perfume and lingered uncomfortably long. "Our future doctor deserves the best, and we wanted everyone to share in his success." I caught Owen's eye across the room. He was standing awkwardly by the fireplace, a half-empty glass of champagne in his hand, looking like he wanted to disappear. The strain in his smile told me everything. He hadn't graduated at all. This was another of my parents' elaborate fictions. "Congratulations, Owen," I called out, playing along as I always did. "Such an achievement. Victor, get Eliza a drink," Camilla commanded. My father appeared with surprising speed for a man of 62, holding a glass of white wine. "Here you go, princess," he said, handing me the glass. "Your favorite Pinot Grigio." I'd told him at least a dozen times that I preferred red wine. White gave me headaches. But correcting him would only lead to a lecture about my sensitive system and how I should have gone to medical school to better understand my own body's reactions. That's when I noticed it, a formal-looking document placed conspicuously on the coffee table, its corner peeking out from beneath a medical journal. My stomach dropped. "Come sit, Eliza," Camilla steered me toward the couch with a firm hand on my back. "Everyone's here to celebrate Owen's milestone." I scanned the room, noting the artificial smiles, the calculating gazes. The only genuine face belonged to Tessa, who was somehow present despite not having been mentioned in any of the communications. Her slight head shake confirmed my suspicions she'd been ambushed too. "Before we bring out the cake," Camilla announced, her voice carrying that rehearsed quality I knew too well, "we thought we'd start with some presents for our medical graduate. And a little something to discuss as a family." Victor moved forward, smoothly sliding the medical journal aside to reveal the document underneath. My pulse quickened as I recognized official letterhead. "What's this?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice even. "Oh, just some paperwork regarding Grandma Harriet's estate and her care facility investments," Camilla said with practiced casualness. "Nothing to worry about. We can deal with it after the celebration." But my eyes had already caught the title, Nursing Home Ownership Transfer Agreement. I picked it up, the paper feeling unexpectedly heavy in my hands. "Actually," I said, meeting Camilla's gaze directly, "since it involves Grandma's care facilities, including the one I manage, maybe we should look at this now, while everyone's here." Camilla's perfect smile faltered for just a moment, her eyes flashing with something between anger and panic. "No, no, darling," she said, her voice rising slightly. "This is Owen's night. Victor, open the champagne for everyone." "Mom," I said firmly, "you know I prefer to understand business matters before celebrations, especially when they involve my workplace." I began to open the folder, watching her face carefully, noting the quick glances she exchanged with my father. "Eliza," she snapped, then quickly softened her tone when heads turned our way, "it's your brother's celebration. Don't you want to enjoy his special moment without bringing work into it?" Owen suddenly spoke up from across the room, his voice uncharacteristically unsteady. "Maybe we should just, Owen." Camilla cut him off sharply, her tone leaving no room for discussion. The look of defeat that crossed my brother's face sent a wave of protective anger through me. I stood up, document firmly in hand. "What exactly am I looking at here?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence, the kind that seems to suck all the oxygen out of the air. Camilla and Victor exchanged a look, and I could practically see them reformulating their approach. "It's just a formality, really," Victor said, his voice adopting that smooth, doctor-patient tone he'd perfected over decades. "Something the lawyers need for the proper management of your grandmother's care facilities. Nothing that can't wait until after the celebration." "Then why bring it to what's supposed to be Owen's graduation party?" I pressed. "Why not discuss it at a proper meeting?" Camilla laughed, a high, brittle sound that set my teeth on edge. "Why are you being so suspicious, darling? Can't we just celebrate your brother's accomplishment?" I looked around the room at all the faces, relatives I barely knew, watching this exchange with the avid interest of spectators at a tennis match. These people, my so-called family, had never supported my career choice, had repeatedly dismissed my expertise in elder care, and had only called when they needed money or favors. And there, in the corner, Tessa was subtly shaking her head, her expression a mixture of concern and encouragement. "Of course we can celebrate Owen," I said finally, setting the document down but keeping my hand firmly on it. "But first, I think we should discuss why you really gathered everyone here tonight. Because I'm quite certain it wasn't just for a graduation that hasn't actually happened." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the ice shifting in people's glasses. Camilla's carefully constructed smile cracked just enough to reveal the desperation beneath, and I knew in that moment that whatever this document contained would change everything between us. "Eliza, darling," she began, reaching for the papers with manicured fingers, "let's not make a scene. This isn't the place." I pulled the document closer to me, my heart pounding against my ribs but my voice remaining steady. "Oh, Mom, I think you made it the place when you brought these papers to this fabricated celebration. A toast." Victor's voice suddenly boomed across the room, his doctor's authority on full display as he attempted to diffuse the tension. "To my brilliant children, Owen on his path to medical greatness, and Eliza, who's always been so practical about these matters." I watched him raise his glass, noticing how his hand trembled slightly, the way it had after his medical license had been temporarily suspended 5 years ago. The document sat heavy in my lap as everyone mechanically lifted their drinks. "To Eliza and Owen," they echoed in hollow chorus. I noticed how they'd paired our names together, as if my brother's imaginary accomplishment somehow made my actual career more acceptable. Camilla swooped in with practiced grace, placing 2 gift boxes on the coffee table, one large, elegantly wrapped package with Owen's name, and a small, crudely wrapped parcel with mine. "Presents first, then cake," she announced, her voice artificially bright. "Owen, darling, this is from your father and me. For your new journey as a doctor." Owen hesitantly unwrapped the large box, revealing an expensive, professional-grade stethoscope and a Rolex watch that must have cost thousands. "Wow," he said, his voice strained. "This is really something." "Thank you." "Only the best for our doctor," Victor beamed, clapping him on the shoulder. "You've earned it." Then Camilla pushed the small package toward me. "And this is for our nursing supervisor. I made it myself." The room watched as I unwrapped the package, finding inside a clumsily assembled nurse kit, a plastic thermometer, a roll of gauze, and what appeared to be a second-hand nurse's cap, the kind not actually used in decades. The condescension was so palpable I could almost taste it. "Since you didn't become a real doctor," Camilla added with a laugh that several relatives echoed, "I thought you might appreciate something that celebrates your choice." The emphasis on choice made it clear she considered it a failure. "Let's get back to the agreement," I said, ignoring the insulting gift and opening the folder. Owen moved closer, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Sis, maybe we should wait. Actually, let's read it aloud," Tessa interrupted, her voice cutting through the tension. "Since it's just a formality about Harriet's care facilities, right?" Camilla shot her a look that could freeze hell. I scanned the document, my nursing administrator's experience with legal paperwork helping me quickly understand its implications. "This is asking me to transfer management control of Sunnydale Care Home to you and Dad?" I looked up, genuinely shocked. "The facility I've been running successfully for 3 years? It's not like that." Victor jumped in, his authoritative doctor's voice on full display. "Your grandmother left specific instructions about proper medical oversight of her care facilities." "Medical oversight?" I repeated, feeling my face flush with anger. "So this is about my lack of a medical degree? Is that why we're pretending Owen graduated tonight?" Aunt Margaret suddenly became very interested in her wine glass. Uncle Pete checked his phone. The cousins shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "We're family," Camilla said, her voice taking on that guilt-inducing tone she'd perfected over decades. "And family looks out for each other. Your father has the medical expertise these facilities need, and you know that. Like the medical expertise he used when he lost his license for negligence?" The words escaped before I could stop them. Victor's face paled. Or like how you've looked out for me by taking the money I lent for Owen's tuition when he failed his classes? Or when you took the checks I sent for Dad's research that went straight to his gambling debts? The room grew painfully quiet. Even the ice in the glasses seemed to stop clinking. That's different, Camilla snapped, her mask of civility slipping. We're your parents. We paid for your nursing school when you couldn't get into medical school. I never wanted to go to medical school, I corrected her, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. And now you want to take Grandma Harriet's care homes too, the places I've worked night and day to improve since she trusted me with them. Owen stepped forward, looking miserable. Eliza, please, just sign it. They won't stop until you do. They've been planning this for weeks. Is that why you're here, Owen? To convince me? I asked, suddenly seeing the manipulation clearly. He couldn't meet my eyes. They said it would sound better coming from me. Of course they did. I stood up, still clutching the document. How long have you all been planning this? Creating this fake graduation party as a cover? Nobody's manipulating anyone. Victor protested, but his voice lacked conviction. We're celebrating Owen's academic progress. He hasn't graduated. I finally said it out loud. He's failed his third year twice. Owen flinched as if I'd struck him, but I couldn't stop. And my birthday isn't until next month, so this clearly isn't for me either. Camilla's composure fractured completely. Just sign the damn paper, Eliza. Stop being so difficult. A mere nursing supervisor has no business running medical facilities. Difficult? I laughed, the sound coming out harsher than I intended. Is that what you call refusing to hand over what Grandma Harriet entrusted to me? You ungrateful little, Camilla caught herself, glancing around at the relatives, then plastered on another smile. Darling, you're making everyone uncomfortable. Good. I turned to address the room. Did all of you know about this? Were you all brought here to pressure me? The uncomfortable shifting and averted gazes were answer enough. Tessa stood up, her expression fierce. I certainly didn't know, and this is absolutely revolting. Stay out of this, Camilla hissed. This is family business. Family? I scoffed, feeling years of suppressed anger finally breaking free. Is that what you call this group of enablers who've watched you exploit me for years? Victor stepped forward, attempting his authoritative doctor voice. Princess, your mother and I have discussed this thoroughly. It's for the best. You don't have the medical expertise, the best for whom, Dad? Your gambling buddies? Or is it for your ego, since you can't practice medicine legally anymore? His face flushed a dangerous red. That's enough. No, it's not nearly enough. I stood up, clutching the document firmly. For years, I've let you belittle my career, drain my bank account, and manipulate me with guilt. But Grandma Harriet trusted me with her care facilities because she saw what I built there without a medical degree. I tore the agreement in half, then in quarters, the sound of ripping paper cutting through the stunned silence. This is what I think of your agreement. You stupid girl. Camilla shrieked, lunging forward to grab the torn pieces. Do you have any idea what you've done? Your father's expertise. My father hasn't legally practiced medicine in 5 years, I said, letting the torn papers fall to the floor. And Grandma Harriet made me administrator for a reason. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm finally standing up for myself. There are copies, Victor threatened weakly, his doctor's authority diminishing before my eyes. Good, I replied, gathering my purse and the tacky nurse kit, a reminder of what I was fighting against. Keep them as souvenirs of the day your plan failed. Tessa was already by my side, car keys in hand. Let's go. As we headed for the door, Owen called out, "Eliza, wait." "Save it," I cut him off, but then saw genuine anguish in his eyes. I softened slightly. "You can tell them about Grandma Harriet's letter and recordings. The ones they don't know about yet." The look of shock on Camilla's face was almost worth the entire evening, almost. "What letter? What recordings?" she demanded, her perfectly manicured hand clutching at the pearls at her throat. "What is she talking about?" I paused at the door, savoring the moment of finally having the upper hand. "I guess you'll find out soon enough. Congratulations on your non-graduation, Owen." Later that night, you should have seen Camilla's face when you mentioned the recordings. Tessa laughed, sliding a mug of herbal tea across her apartment counter. I thought her Botox was going to crack from the strain. It was nearly midnight, and the adrenaline from the confrontation was finally wearing off. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, trying to stop them from trembling. "I can't believe they actually tried to pull this off," I said, staring into the steaming liquid. "Actually, no, I can totally believe it. They've been undermining my career since I chose nursing over medical school. This was just their most elaborate attempt yet." "So, what's in these mysterious recordings that had your mom looking like she'd swallowed her pearls whole?" I pulled out my phone and opened a file. Grandma Harriet sent me these letters and recordings through her lawyer 2 days before she passed away. Tessa leaned in closer as I pressed play on the audio recording. My grandmother's warm, slightly raspy voice filled the room, still strong despite speaking from what I knew was her deathbed. "My dearest Eliza," her familiar voice began, clear despite the slight crackle of the recording. "If you're listening to this, I'm already gone. And if I know your mother, which I unfortunately do all too well, she's already trying to get control of my care facilities that I've entrusted to you." "Holy crap," Tessa whispered, eyes widening. "There's more," I said, turning up the volume. The sound of papers rustling came through the speaker as Grandma Harriet continued. "I've watched how they've treated you over the years," she said, her voice taking on an edge of anger I rarely heard when she was alive. "How they've belittled your career choice, drained you financially, and dismissed your accomplishments. Camilla did the same to me after I chose nursing over teaching like she wanted. Always demanding, never appreciating. That's why I've made certain legal arrangements." The recording continued as my grandmother detailed her plans with remarkable clarity. She explained how she'd secretly purchased controlling shares in Sunnydale Care Home and the 2 other facilities in our network, how she'd structured the ownership to bypass my parents entirely, and how she'd ensured my position as administrator was legally protected. Tessa's mouth literally dropped open as the details unfolded. "Your grandmother was a certifiable genius," she said when the recording ended. "An absolute strategic mastermind. She knew exactly what they'd try to do and planned for it years in advance." I took a sip of tea, letting the warmth spread through my chest. Now I need to figure out my next move. They're not going to accept this easily. My phone buzzed loudly against the counter. Another text from Camilla, "We need to discuss what happened tonight. Your father is extremely upset. Call me immediately." "Don't you dare," Tessa warned, watching me stare at the message. "You know it's just another manipulation tactic." "Oh, I'm not calling her," I said, starting to type a response. "All communication goes through Diane from now on." "Diane? The family lawyer?" Tessa asked, peering over my shoulder. "Grandma Harriet's lawyer," I corrected, "and apparently my new strongest ally. We're meeting tomorrow morning at the care facility to go over everything." Tessa sat back, studying my face with a strange expression. "You seem different tonight," she said finally. "More certain. Stronger." I stared into my tea for a moment. "I'm exhausted, Tessa." Not just physically, but emotionally. Tired of being their emotional punching bag, tired of having my career dismissed as some kind of failure. Did you know last month Dad asked me to co-sign a loan for what he called vital medical research equipment? Please tell me you didn't. I almost did, I admitted. But then I discovered it was actually for a medical conference in Vegas that just happened to be at a casino resort. I shook my head at the memory. The conference was only 2 hours each day. The casino was open 24/7. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Owen. They're completely losing it here. Mom's talking about challenging Grandma's will. Dad's threatening to call hospital administrators he knows. What recordings were you talking about? Your brother's reaching out, Tessa observed, glancing at my phone screen. That's new. He's probably just doing their dirty work again, I sighed, typing back a response. Tell Mom to save her energy. She might need it. Nicely cryptic, Tessa approved with a smile. I like it. Another message popped up, this time from an unknown number. This is Diane. Can we move our meeting to 7:30 a.m.? Things are escalating faster than expected. I showed Tessa the message. Even Diane knows they're going to try something drastic. What do you think they'll do? Tessa asked, her brow furrowed with concern. Knowing my mother? Everything and anything, I replied, confirming the earlier meeting time. She once faked chest pains to get me to pay for her spa retreat. Called me from the emergency room and everything. No way. Yes way, I nodded. Turned out she was calling from the Beverly Hills Hotel Day Spa. When I confronted her later, she said the stress of not being able to afford the treatments was giving her actual palpitations. Tessa shook her head in disbelief. And you're sure about taking this stand? Once you start down this path, there's no going back to the way things were. I played the recording one more time, focusing on my grandmother's final words. Remember, darling, sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling them. You're stronger than you know. Make them see that. I'm sure, I said, closing the audio file. For once in my life, I'm absolutely certain about what I need to do. My phone lit up with a barrage of new messages, Camilla, Victor, even Aunt Margaret trying to play mediator. I silenced them all with a decisive tap. You can stay here tonight, Tessa offered. You shouldn't be alone after all this. Thanks, but I need to go home and prepare for tomorrow, I said, gathering my things. I have years of financial records and care facility documentation to organize before I meet with Diane. Want me to come with you to the meeting? She asked. I hugged her tight, grateful for her steadfast friendship. No, this is something I need to do alone. But keep your phone on, something tells me tomorrow is going to be interesting. As I drove home through the quiet suburban streets, Grandma Harriet's words echoed in my head. For years, I'd been their emotional punching bag, their bank, their scapegoat for everything that went wrong. But now, thanks to my grandmother's foresight, I had the power to change everything. My phone buzzed one final time. Another text from Owen. Whatever you're planning, just be careful, okay? You know how they get when they don't get their way. I did know. But for the first time, that knowledge didn't fill me with anxiety or dread. Instead, I felt something new, determination. The next morning, Diane's office at Sunnydale Care Home felt surprisingly cozy despite its professional appearance. At exactly 7:30 a.m., she closed the door behind me, checking twice to ensure it was locked. Your mother called me 14 times last night, she said, settling behind her desk with a wry smile. Your father tried to schedule an urgent meeting at my house at midnight. That sounds about right, I sighed, placing my folder of facility records and financial documents on her desk. Did they threaten you? Camilla attempted to fire me. Diane's lips curved into a small, satisfied smile. She seems to have forgotten that I was your grandmother's lawyer, not hers. Classic Camilla, I said, leaning forward. So, what's our next move? Diane pulled out a thick file folder, the edges neat but well worn. Your grandmother was incredibly meticulous in her planning. She knew exactly what your parents would try to do. The recordings and letters were just the beginning, weren't they? Harriet recorded those as insurance, Diane continued, but the real protection is in the terms of her legal arrangements for the care facilities. Diane opened the file. Have you listened to all the recordings yet? Not yet, I admitted. I only played the first few minutes with Tessa. Listen to this one now. All of it. I pulled out my phone and played the next recording I hadn't heard yet. Grandma Harriet's voice came through, sounding more businesslike than in the previous recording. Eliza, my dear, here's what I've done, she began. The ownership of all 3 care facilities is structured in a way that makes it impossible for Camilla or Victor to gain control, even through you. The facilities are legally under a management trust with very specific conditions. Diane paused the recording. This is where it gets interesting. The conditions? I asked, leaning forward. Your grandmother stipulated that the care facilities can only be operated under 3 specific guidelines, Diane explained. First, they must maintain their current mission of affordable, high-quality elder care. Second, all major decisions must be approved by a board that includes at least 3 current residents. And third, this is the key part, management can only be entrusted to someone with at least 5 years of direct elder care experience, not just administrative or medical credentials. I sat back, stunned. She thought of everything. There's more, Diane said, pressing play again. If anyone in the family attempts to contest these conditions, Grandma Harriet continued, her voice firm, or if they try to pressure you into changing the management structure, a clause activates that automatically transfers 50% of the ownership to a nonprofit elder care advocacy group. Oh my God, I whispered. Your grandmother was extremely thorough, Diane said, stopping the recording. She also left me specific instructions about handling your family's inevitable reaction, which she predicted would be, in her words, nuclear when they discover they can't use their medical credentials to take over. That's precisely why we need to plan this carefully, I said. Diane pulled out another document. I've prepared a formal letter outlining all these terms. We'll send it to them today. They'll try to fight it, I warned. They can try, Diane's expression hardened. But the more they fight, the more ownership goes to the nonprofit. It's legally ironclad. My phone buzzed, Camilla again. I showed the screen to Diane. Perfect timing, she said with a knowing smile. Let's give them a preview of what they're facing. I answered on speaker. Hello? Don't you hello me. Where are you? Camilla's sharp voice filled the room, echoing slightly off the walls of Diane's office. We need to talk about your disgraceful behavior last night. I'm with Diane right now, I replied calmly. A brief pause. Put her on the phone. You're on speaker, Diane said, her professional tone unwavering. Diane, what nonsense have you been filling my daughter's head with? Camilla demanded, her voice brittle with barely controlled anger. I demand to see Harriet's full will and care facility arrangements immediately. Of course, Diane replied smoothly. I'm sending it all to you today, along with a detailed explanation of the management trust conditions. Trust conditions? Camilla's voice rose nearly an octave. What trust conditions? The ones Grandma Harriet put in place, I interjected. The ones that make it impossible for you or Dad to ever take control of the care facilities. That's ridiculous. Camilla sputtered. I'm her daughter. I have rights. Actually, Diane interjected with clinical precision, you don't. And I should inform you that any attempt to contest these conditions will result in an automatic transfer of 50% ownership to the National Elder Care Advocacy Coalition. The silence on the other end was so complete I could hear the faint ticking of the clock on Diane's wall. Mom? I prompted. This is your grandmother's revenge, isn't it? Camilla's voice had turned cold as ice. She always was a spiteful old woman. No, Mom, I replied firmly. This is her protection for me. Protection? She laughed bitterly. From what? Your own family? From exactly this reaction, I said. Check your email in an hour. Everything will be explained in Diane's letter. Eliza, don't you dare hang, I ended the call. Well said, Diane nodded approvingly. That went about as expected. What happens now? Now we wait for them to receive the letter. She handed me a USB drive. This contains everything else your grandmother wanted you to have: the care facility records, personal messages, evidence of their past manipulations. Evidence? Harriet kept detailed records of every time they took advantage of you, every loan, every guilt trip, every scheme to control your career choices, Diane explained, her eyes meeting mine with unexpected compassion. She wanted you to have proof in case you ever doubted yourself or your decisions. I clutched the USB drive, feeling its weight in my palm far beyond its physical presence. She really did think of everything, didn't she? She did, Diane confirmed, standing up. Are you ready for what comes next? Because once they get that letter. I'm ready, I said, standing too. For the first time in my life, I'm actually ready. 3 days after Diane sent the letter, Camilla showed up at Sunnydale Care Home. Through the glass walls of my office, I watched her charm her way past the reception desk, wearing her most expensive designer suit and carrying what looked like a takeout bag from an upscale restaurant. Darling, she breathed as she swept into my office before I could stop her. I brought your favorite, that mushroom risotto you love from Bellini's. I'm allergic to mushrooms, Mom. Always have been. She waved dismissively, setting the bag down on my desk. Oh, is that right? Well, no matter. We need to talk. Everything that needs to be said was in Diane's letter. About that. Camilla perched herself on the edge of my desk, her perfume overpowering in the small space. Your father and I have been thinking, perhaps we all overreacted. I kept typing my resident care report, not looking up. Did you now? We understand you're upset. We could have handled things better at Owen's celebration, she said, reaching out to touch my hand, but I pulled away. But surely we can find a compromise. There is no compromise, I stated flatly. The terms of Grandma's trust are clear. Terms can be changed, she countered smoothly. Laws can be interpreted. Finally, I looked up, meeting her eyes directly. Any attempt to challenge the terms results in half the ownership going to the nonprofit. Is that clear enough for you? Don't be difficult, Eliza, her voice took on that familiar edge of warning. We're your parents. Everything we've done has been for your own good. My phone buzzed with a text from Owen. Mom's there, isn't she? Dad sent her. Really sorry. I held up my phone, showing her the screen with financial records I'd compiled. Was it for my own good when you took out credit cards in my name during nursing school? Or when you guilted me into paying for Owen's repeated medical school tuition when he failed? Family helps family, she said stiffly. Is that what you call it? I pulled up more records. Like when you told me Dad needed money for specialized medical equipment, but it actually went straight to his gambling debts? Her face hardened. You've been keeping tabs on us? No, Grandma Harriet did. She kept every receipt, every bank statement, every desperate voicemail you left me asking for money. That interfering she caught herself. Your grandmother didn't understand our family dynamic. Your family dynamic? I laughed without humor. You mean where I'm the ATM and you're the perpetual withdrawer? Camilla stood up, smoothing her expensive skirt with manicured hands. I can see you're not in a reasonable mood today. But think about this carefully, darling. Do you really want to destroy our family over some nursing homes? You already did that, Mom. Years ago. Don't be dramatic, she snapped, pulling out an envelope from her designer purse. Your father had our lawyer draw up a new agreement. Something that benefits everyone. I didn't touch the envelope. Did you not understand the letter? Any attempt to circumvent Grandma's wishes triggers the non-profit clause, unless I voluntarily agree to share control. She smiled triumphantly. We found a loophole. There are no loopholes. I pressed the intercom. Security, please escort someone from my office. You ungrateful little, she caught herself as two security guards appeared at my door. Eliza, think about what you're doing. I have. For years. I turned back to my computer. Goodbye, Mom. This isn't over, she called as the guards politely but firmly led her out. Your father will be in touch. My phone buzzed again. Owen, how bad was it? I typed back, she brought mushroom risotto. Ouch. You're allergic to mushrooms. Exactly. Another text came through, this time from Victor. Princess, let's discuss this over dinner tonight. Your choice of restaurant. I showed the text to Tessa, who'd been quietly observing from the nurse's station outside my office. They're not giving up, are they? She asked, coming in and closing the door. No, but they're getting desperate, I said, forwarding Victor's text to Diane. Which means they'll make mistakes. What's your next move? Tessa asked. I pulled up my calendar. Dad wants dinner. Fine, but it'll be on my terms. You're actually going? Yes, I said, typing a response to Victor. Because he needs to see I'm not that scared, meek nursing student anymore. And because Diane and I have something planned. What kind of something? She asked, concerned. I smiled, remembering the contents of the USB drive. Let's just say Grandma Harriet left me more than just care facilities. She left me the truth about everything they've done, and tomorrow night Dad's going to get a preview. Be careful, Tessa warned. Cornered animals are the most dangerous. I know. I looked at the photo on my desk, not the old family portrait I used to display, but a new one showing me with my care home staff and several smiling residents. But I'm done being careful. It's time to be brave. My phone lit up with Victor's reply, wonderful, Princess. Name the place. I typed back, Lou Bistro, 7 p.m. Come alone. Then added, and Dad, don't bother bringing any documents this time. I have plenty of my own to share. Lou Bistro was Victor's kind of place, expensive enough to make him feel important but with private booths perfect for conducting what he would consider serious business. It was also where he'd once taken me to dinner to convince me to drop out of nursing school and apply to medical school instead, a conversation that had ended with me in tears. The symmetry felt appropriate. At the restaurant, I arrived at Lou Bistro 20 minutes early, selecting a corner booth that offered privacy while still being visible to other diners, a small safety measure Diane had suggested. I arranged my tablet and the documents she had prepared, a strange calm settling over me despite the confrontation to come. Victor walked in at exactly 7 p.m., scanning the restaurant with the practiced gaze of someone used to assessing rooms. He was wearing his important business tie, the burgundy one with subtle gold accents that he'd worn to every major hospital board meeting during his practicing days. I remembered how he used to adjust it nervously before entering those meetings, a humanizing gesture I rarely saw otherwise. "Princess, you look well," he said, leaning in for his usual kiss on the cheek. "Hi, Dad." I remained seated, not rising for the expected hug. "Please sit." His smile faltered slightly as he noticed my tablet and the neat stack of folders. "I thought we could just have a nice dinner. Father and daughter, like old times." "We will," I assured him, "right after we discuss a few things." The waiter appeared, and Victor ordered his usual scotch, make it a double, while I requested water. "Just water?" Victor raised an eyebrow. "I need to stay clear-headed," I explained. "Always so serious," he chuckled, but the nervousness in his laugh was unmistakable. "You know, your mother was quite upset after your meeting today." "Was she upset about bringing me food I'm allergic to? Or about trying to circumvent Grandma's wishes regarding the care facilities?" I asked pointedly. He shifted uncomfortably, his fingers toying with his silverware. "About that, we've been thinking." "Let me stop you right there." I opened my tablet, swiping to the first document. "Before you continue, there's something you need to see." "Eliza, please, can't we just enjoy dinner first?" "I've made reservations at, remember last year when you said you needed $45,000 for groundbreaking medical research equipment?" I cut him off. His face paled visibly under the restaurant's soft lighting. "That's ancient history." I turned the tablet toward him, showing a series of bank transfers and credit card statements. "Funny how these transfers match exactly with your casino visits in Las Vegas. The dates align perfectly with that medical conference that somehow lasted 5 days but only had 6 total hours of actual conference time." "How did you?" "Grandma Harriet kept records of everything," I said, pulling out more documents. "Like this loan for Owen's emergency medical school tuition that somehow ended up paying for your membership at that exclusive golf club. Or these car payments for a vehicle registered in your name that I apparently co-signed for, except I never did." "That's personal information," he protested, his doctor's authority crumbling. "No, Dad. That's fraud." I laid out more papers. "Just like the credit cards you and Mom opened in my name when I was in nursing school, telling me it would build my credit while maxing them out and leaving me with the debt." Victor's hand shook as he reached for his scotch, taking a long swallow. "We were trying to help you establish yourself financially." "You mean after I refused to drop out of nursing school to apply to medical programs? After I insisted on a career you both considered beneath you?" "We paid those cards back," he said defensively. "Only after I threatened to report the identity theft," I reminded him. "Should we talk about the loans for the mortgage payments on your house? The ones you said were temporary but somehow became permanent?" "Enough." He slammed his hand on the table, making the glasses rattle. Several heads turned our way. "You're right," I said calmly. "It is enough. That's why Grandma put those conditions in place. Your grandmother was a manipulative old woman who saw exactly what you and Mom were doing to me," I finished for him. "And who left me everything I need to prove it." Victor's face went through a series of emotions: anger, fear, calculation, before finally settling on his negotiation smile, the one he used to use with difficult patients. "Princess, surely we can work something out. Family helps family, remember?" "That's exactly what Mom said today." "Because it's true," he insisted, leaning forward. "Everything we did for you. For your future." I pulled up one final document. "Like when you took out a life insurance policy on me without my knowledge, naming yourselves as the sole beneficiaries? The color drained from his face. That's not. I can explain. Save it. I closed the tablet decisively. Here's what's going to happen. You and Mom are going to stop trying to get around Grandma's conditions. No more surprise visits, no more legal loopholes, no more guilt trips. Or what? Or all these documents go to the State Medical Board and the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. I met his eyes steadily. Diane has already prepared the package. He sat back, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. You'd do that to your own father? You did this to yourself, Dad. You and Mom both. The waiter returned to take our order, but Victor waved him away. I've lost my appetite, he muttered. That's fine. I have dinner plans with Tessa anyway. I started packing up my things. Oh, and one more thing. I'm donating 20% of Grandma's trust to support elder care education programs for nursing assistants. Consider it your contribution to improving the career you've always looked down on. Camilla will never accept this. Camilla doesn't have a choice, I stood up. Neither do you. As I turned to leave, he called out, his voice suddenly smaller. We're still your parents. I looked back at him, seeing not the intimidating former physician of my childhood but a desperate man who'd lost his last play. Yes, you are, I said softly. That's what makes this so sad. Later that night, I texted Diane as I walked through the parking lot, it's done. Dad knows. Her reply came quickly, Camilla's already called 3 times. Are you ready for tomorrow? I thought about the final phase of our plan, the family meeting where everything would come to a head. Ready as I'll ever be, I typed back. Is the presentation prepared? I asked. Everything's in place, she wrote. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., they'll all learn exactly what Harriet had planned. I got into my car, catching a glimpse of Victor still sitting in the restaurant, staring into his empty scotch glass. See you tomorrow, I texted Diane. Time to end this once and for all. The next day, Diane's conference room at Sunnydale Care Home felt smaller with my entire family crammed inside. Camilla sat rigidly at one end of the table, her perfect posture a counterpoint to Victor's slumped shoulders beside her. He was still nursing what looked like a hangover from last night. Owen had chosen a seat halfway between them and me, like he couldn't decide whose side to take. Let's begin, Diane said, closing the door with a decisive click. We're here to discuss the final terms of Harriet's Care Facility Trust. We're here, Camilla interrupted sharply, because my daughter has lost her mind. Actually, I pressed a button on the remote control. We're here to watch something. The lights dimmed, and Grandma Harriet's face appeared on the wall screen, larger than life. Her silver hair was pulled back in her characteristic no-nonsense bun, her eyes clear and determined despite being filmed in her final weeks. If you're watching this, she began, it means my family has done exactly what I expected them to do. Camilla stood up abruptly. I don't have to listen to this nonsense. Sit down, Diane commanded, her voice leaving no room for argument. Or the 50% nonprofit clause activates immediately. My mother sank back into her chair, practically vibrating with fury. Camilla, Harriet's recording continued, my disappointing daughter. I've watched you manipulate and exploit your own child the same way you tried to exploit me. Did you think I didn't know about the credit cards, the fake emergencies, the endless demands for money disguised as family responsibility? Victor reached for Camilla's hand, but she pulled away sharply. And Victor, Harriet's voice hardened. Enabling your wife's schemes while adding your own, gambling away your daughter's generosity, lying about medical emergencies, treating her like your personal bank. all while belittling the very profession that cares for people like me when doctors like you are done with them. This is slander, Victor muttered under his breath. Every word I'm saying is documented, Harriet continued, as if anticipating his response. Every loan, every lie, every manipulation. And now, my dear family, here's what's going to happen. The screen changed to show a series of legal documents. All 3 care facilities have been placed in an irrevocable management trust. Eliza is the sole executive director with ironclad conditions that prevent any family member without direct elder care experience from interfering with operations. Any attempt to challenge these conditions will result in automatic transfer of partial ownership to a non-profit alliance. We know all this, Camilla snapped impatiently. Get to the point. The point, Harriet's face reappeared on the screen, her expression grave but determined, is that I'm not finished. Eliza, my dear, open the envelope Diane has just handed you. Diane passed me a sealed envelope with confidential stamped across it in red. I broke the seal, pulling out a single document with official letterhead. Read it aloud, Diane instructed, her voice gentle but firm. I cleared my throat and began reading. I, Harriet Bennett, hereby declare that in addition to the management trust for the care facilities, all ownership shares in Sunnydale Healthcare Network are to be transferred to Eliza Bennett, effective immediately. Camilla's scream could probably be heard 3 floors down, making several of the residents' doors open in the hallway outside. The network? You're giving her the entire network? Your life's work? The very same healthcare network, Harriet continued from the screen as if she could hear her daughter's protests, that you and Victor have been systematically undermining with your mismanagement and unauthorized fund transfers. The same network that currently operates 5 elder care facilities across 3 counties. Owen finally spoke up, looking directly at our parents. Is that true? Have you been taking money from Grandma's care facilities? Of course not. Victor protested, but his face told a different story. The slight twitch at the corner of his mouth always gave away his lies. The proof is all here, Diane said, distributing folders to everyone at the table. Every unauthorized transfer, every falsified report, every consultant fee paid to shell companies you both control. I flipped through the documents, the full picture finally becoming clear. This is why you've been so desperate to get control, I realized aloud. The inheritance wasn't just about Grandma's money. You needed it to cover up what you've been doing at the care facilities. You don't understand, Camilla pleaded, her perfect composure finally cracking completely. We had expenses, obligations. Like Dad's gambling debts? Owen asked pointedly. Or Mom's shopping addiction, he continued, finding his voice. How dare you? Camilla gasped, clutching her designer scarf. How dare I what? Tell the truth? Owen moved his chair closer to mine, physically demonstrating his changed allegiance. I'm done covering for you both. I'm done pretending to be the perfect medical student to satisfy your egos. As of now, Diane announced with professional authority, Eliza has full control of Sunnydale Healthcare Network. Any corporate credit cards or accounts you have access to have been frozen. You can't do this. Victor stammered, half rising from his chair. I'm the medical director. Not anymore. I stood up, feeling a strange calm despite the chaos around me. Your resignation letter is in that folder. Sign it, or face an internal audit that will lead to criminal charges for Medicare fraud. Camilla lunged for the folders, but Diane was faster, pulling them away from her grasp. This isn't over. Camilla hissed, her carefully maintained appearance beginning to dissolve under the strain. If you fight this, then 50% of the network goes to the non-profit alliance, I reminded her. and all the financial records go to the State Medical Licensing Board. The fight seemed to drain out of both my parents all at once. Victor just stared at the resignation letter, his hand shaking slightly as Diane placed a pen in front of him. "Sign it, Dad," Owen said quietly. "It's over." As Victor scrawled his signature, Harriet's voice filled the room one last time. "Remember, Camilla, you taught Eliza everything she knows about family loyalty. And Victor, you showed her exactly what happens when trust is betrayed. Consider this her graduation from your master class in manipulation." I picked up the signed resignation letter. "Diane will be in touch about transitional arrangements. For now, I think we're done here. Eliza." Camilla called out desperately as I reached the door. "We're still your parents." I turned back one last time, meeting her gaze steadily. "Yes, you are. And that's the saddest part of all this. You could have just been my parents, but you chose to be something else entirely." The door closed behind me, leaving them with nothing but the echo of Harriet's final words and the wreckage of their own making. 1 week later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of my grandmother's old office at Sunnydale Healthcare's main building. I sat in her chair, running my fingers over the worn leather armrests, remembering how she used to let me spin in it when I visited as a nursing student. How she would tell me stories about difficult patients she'd cared for, teaching me that compassion and competence were equally important in healthcare. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. "Come in." Owen entered carrying 2 coffee cups. "Thought you might need this. First board meeting and all." "Thanks." I accepted the cup, noticing how different he looked in a simple button-down shirt and khakis instead of the expensive clothes our parents had always insisted he wear. There was a lightness to him I hadn't seen in years. "Ready for your new role as Resident Services Coordinator?" I asked. He smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. "Never thought I'd say this, but yeah, it feels right. Better than failing out of medical school with Dad's expectations crushing me." He sat down across from me. "About that. I had no idea where all that money for my tuition really came from. I should have asked more questions." My phone buzzed, a text from Camilla, "Your father's in the hospital. Please call immediately." "Let me guess," Owen said, seeing my expression. "Mom's trying the medical emergency trick again?" I showed him the text, then pulled up another app on my phone. "Dad's not in any hospital. He's at the Golden Shore Casino in Vegas. I saw his credit card alert this morning." "You still have access to his cards?" "Only the alerts. Figured we should keep tabs on them." I paused, scanning through my emails. "Have you heard from Diane?" "She's finished processing their termination paperwork. All company assets have been recovered," he reported. Though apparently Mom tried to empty the corporate apartment before security arrived. "Classic Camilla," I sighed. Owen shook his head. "You know, I always wondered why Grandma Harriet spent so much time teaching you about the care facilities. Now I get it. She knew what they were doing long before we did." I stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the beautifully maintained gardens where several residents were enjoying their morning walks with caregivers. "The question is, what do we do now?" I mused. "Ms. Bennett," my assistant's voice came through the intercom. "The board members are ready." "Show them in," I replied, straightening my jacket. The boardroom filled quickly with people from across the healthcare network, facility directors, nursing supervisors, even a few resident representatives, a new addition I'd insisted on. I recognized the skeptical looks from some of the older members, the same dismissive glances Camilla and Victor used to give me. "Good morning," I began, standing at the head of the table. "I know many of you worked with my father and grandmother. Today, we're going to discuss some changes. I clicked through my presentation, outlining the new direction for Sunnydale Healthcare, improved staff-to-resident ratios, continuing education programs for care workers, family involvement initiatives. With each slide, I could see the skepticism turning to interest. And finally, I concluded, we're establishing the Harriet Bennett Foundation for Elder Care Excellence. 20% of our annual budget will fund programs helping improve quality of life for seniors and working conditions for caregivers. The room erupted in discussion. Owen caught my eye and nodded approvingly. My phone buzzed again, this time from Tessa. They're here. If you'll excuse me, I addressed the board, there's something I need to handle personally. In the lobby, Camilla and Victor stood arguing with security. They looked smaller somehow, less intimidating than they had my entire life. Let them up, I told the guards. Eliza. Camilla rushed forward. Finally, you're being reasonable, stop. I held up my hand. I'm not changing my mind. I'm not giving you money. I'm not reversing any decisions. Then why let us in? Victor demanded, his doctor's authority a mere shadow of its former self. To give you these. I handed them each an envelope. Information about gambling addiction support groups and financial counseling services. The foundation will cover all costs. We don't need charity, Camilla spat, but her hand trembled as she clutched the envelope. No, you need help. Real help. I stepped back. When you're ready to get it, call. Until then, we have nothing to discuss. You'd abandon your own parents? Victor tried his guilt-trip voice one last time. No, Dad. I'm trying to save them from themselves. I turned to leave. The choice is yours. Epilogue. Back in my office, Owen waited with Tessa, who'd slipped in during the confrontation in the lobby. How'd it go? Tessa asked, perching on the edge of my desk. About as expected, I replied, feeling strangely light despite the emotional weight of the encounter. I picked up a framed photo from my desk, not the old family portrait that had sat there for years, but a new one of me with Tessa and Owen taken at Sunnydale's community garden during last month's resident picnic. 3 people surrounded by elderly residents with genuine smiles, not a forced grimace among them. For the first time, I admitted, I feel like I did the right thing. Not just for me, but for everyone we care for here. Grandma Harriet would be proud, Owen said, his voice steady with newfound confidence. Speaking of which. He opened my desk drawer and pulled out 3 crystal champagne flutes wrapped in tissue paper. Where did you find those? I asked, surprised. Grandma gave them to me last year, he explained. She said to keep them safe and bring them out when Eliza finally stands up for herself. She left this bottle for today specifically. He revealed an expensive bottle of champagne with a handwritten note still attached, for the day you both find your way. As we toasted, I looked around at my chosen family, my brother who'd finally found his authentic path, my best friend who'd stood by me through everything, and the legacy of a grandmother who understood that sometimes the strongest love means saying no to those who would diminish you. To freedom, Tessa proposed, raising her glass. To new beginnings, Owen added, his eyes clear and present in a way they hadn't been for years. And to finally writing our own stories, I finished, clinking my glass against theirs. Through the window, I watched Camilla and Victor walk slowly toward their car, envelopes still clutched in their hands. Maybe someday they'd understand the true meaning of family. Maybe they'd get the help they needed. Maybe they wouldn't. But for the first time in my life, their choices were no longer my burden to bear. The afternoon sun caught the etching on Grandma Harriet's old nursing pin that I now wore proudly on my lapel, care with dignity. Words to live by, for my residents and for myself.